Hey everybody, Shawn here. Welcome to my studio. I've got another pedal to show you today. This one's made by Pettyjohn and it's called the Pre-Drive Studio or Pre-Drive version 2 Studio. So there it is right there. It might look familiar to you. It's the new version of the original pre-drive. It's got some things that are different on it for sure. One of the cool things about it that I'll mention is it allows you to choose now between using either balanced or unbalanced inputs and outputs to the box. So you would do your balanced inputs via tip ring sleeve or TRS cables. And you can choose between the balanced and unbalanced inputs via the left foot switch, which we will get to. But it makes it an amazing tool for reamping. It makes it great if you want to be able to plug a microphone into it. Pretty much any musical application, it opens up a lot of possibilities in that realm. Okay, so let's just go through the controls as quickly as possible. At the top right of the pedal, that control is your input gain to the pedal. So it'll go basically from unity to, I believe, plus 6 dB. The control next to that, top center, that is your buffer amp or buffer trim level. So you can basically trim up or down your level to your DAW if you would like to, or a mixing console. And then now keep in mind that does affect both the balanced and unbalanced output. So as you turn that up and down, they're both going to come up or down. Now the control on the top left is the output of the pedal. That is only effective on the unbalanced out. So if you want to be able to crank to the amp a little bit harder without hitting the DAW or console harder, then you can use that accordingly. The large control in the center, that's your actual boost level. So when you engage the boost, you've got up to 30 dB of totally clean, virtually no distortion artifacts boost. Works really, really well. And the reason it's got 30 dB of boost is, once again, if you're using a microphone or something like that, you could actually use this as a mic preamp. To the left of that large control is a toggle switch. That is your high and low cut filter EQ bypass. And then to the right of that, that switch actually allows you to choose between mic and line level, depending on what you're using to the input of the box. Now the controls on the bottom, your bottom right control, that is your high cut EQ, and then bottom left is your low cut control, and that's totally studio grade console grade EQs, and they're super musical and sound fabulous. And I got a lot of use out of that. And then the switches on the bottom, the right switch allows you to choose between inputs. So you can choose between either a balanced input, which would be red, or an unbalanced input, which is essentially white. Now this pedal can't be bypassed, unfortunately, but it's so musical. Once you get it dialed the way you want it, it's pretty much going to be your pedal you leave on all the time, and that's certainly what I did. But I will demo it in a looper so you guys can really get a feel for how this thing dials. The switch on the left is that's the boost switch. So when you engage that, then you can start rolling up the amount of boost you want. At the front of the box, the top right is your unbalanced input, essentially your guitar input. Top left would be your unbalanced output, and then bottom right is your balanced input via TRS, and then of course the bottom left is going to be your balanced out, once again, TRS cable. So that's pretty much it. And the one thing, this one is set up to have dual rail voltage. So if you plug in a 9-volt adapter to it, it's going to run at 18 and so on. If you run an 18 volt, you're going to be running 36 into it, which I recommend because that's how this guy is going to sound the best. So yeah, without further ado, let's give this thing a listen. And please stick around. After the talking points, I'm going to demo what I did with it as a reamp box, and it worked swimmingly. It was really, really excellent for that. Okay, so let's get to it. Okay guys, let's check out this Pettyjohn pre-drive studio pedal. I'm going to use my Suhr Stratocaster. It's got Michael Landau standard single coils and an SSV in the back. And I'm going to use this Suhr Bella amplifier, really fabulous clean amp. Now, to just explain, as I mentioned in the talking points, this pedal doesn't actually true bypass because it's choosing between two inputs, either the balanced or the unbalanced input. So I thought it'd be best when demoing this to kind of show you how I use the pedal to go ahead and put it in a looper, although I think eventually you wouldn't need that because you'd understand the pedal and how it's reacting to the amp, and you could pretty much just leave it in all the time, but for these purposes I thought it would help. Okay, so here's just how the amp is dialed. I've got the Bella dialed, I would say less ornate, to basically just show what you can do with this pedal. Okay, and here is the studio. Now the way I dialed it was just to kind of enhance a little bit. So just the Bella. And here is the studio. So you can hear it's just a beautiful sounding studio grade box. I mean, it's just got all of these cool just tricks and tools. It's just kind of magical. What I'll do is show you kind of how I use the gain staging. One way to run this, like right now the way I have it dialed, was kind of just the sweet spot where it would give me just a little more with maybe a little bit, there's a little bit of grind there and a little bit more top end, and it's just fuller sounding. You can hear just that little bit of hair on it. And that's all in how you dial it. You've got an input, you've got a trim, which is basically it attenuates the buffer output of the box, which also affects both the balanced out and the unbalanced out. And then you also have an output that only affects the unbalanced out, which would go to your amp. So one way you could start with this pedal is here. I'll just shut the loop off, the looper I'm using, and here's a trick that actually Steven at Pettyjohn mentioned trying, is dialing the pedal like this. So essentially the input is off, the output is dimed, and then I've got the trim set kind of 1 o'clock-ish. So here's the pedal off. Here's the pedal on. So that's almost unity. If you're trying to kind of understand how hard you're hitting the amp, that would be a really good starting point. And then you can start turning things up from there. Like I could leave this output dimed. And that's a sound. That's the thing. There's no like right or wrong way to do it. I could turn the output way down and turn the input up quite a bit. And that's a little cleaner. And you just kind of find the sweet spot. Like for me, it was about right there. Because it wasn't hitting the amp way harder, but it was kind of just waking things up and giving it a little bit of grind. So I can turn, like check it out, I can turn the buffer trim all the way down. And that's a sound, you know, that was all the way off to about, you know, maybe 2 o'clock. Or we could turn the output way down and the buffer all the way up. And that's pretty much how I had it dialed for the song. And I loved it for that. So that kind of gives you an idea. Like I said, I don't really feel like there's rules with how you dial this box. You just kind of find the sweet spots that you like by just experimenting with it. So the next thing I'll show you is right now the EQ's been bypassed the whole time. So let's just listen to that really quick. And it's great that you can bypass it, because if you want to just be able to run straight in and have zero coloration with the box sounding this great, you can, but you may find that you want to roll low end off and things like that. So the EQ is really high, studio grade EQ. We'll start with a high cut. Super musical. And then the low cut. Really big sweep, super musical. I didn't even use that until I started hitting overdrives and started using the boost section. Speaking of, let's go ahead and listen to that. I'll go ahead and turn the EQ back. Well, you know what? I'll leave the EQ on, and we'll just listen to the boost real quick. And I've got to be careful to watch my levels so I don't kill the input of my Pro Tools rig. It's capable of up to 30 dB of boost, clean, with almost no distortion. Now, the distortion you will hear is you'll be murdering the front end of your amp if you really did dime this thing. But the reason they did that is because you could use this as a mic preamp, and you'd have plenty of output to drive your DAW system, or whatever it is you're hitting, mixing console, whatever it happens to be. So let's just turn the boost on. So that's a ton of boost. I mean, that's probably a good 10 dB. I'll roll it off and then up. So it's off, on. And what you're hearing, the overdrive you're hearing, is we're just clobbering the front end of the amp. It's killer. What I ended up using that for was when I turned on an overdrive box. So you know what, let me just do that really quick, because this thing, because of the way it's designed, it really does play nicely with pretty much any overdrive. So let me just turn on my, I'll turn on the 45 caliber, the Rockett Pedals. Plays really nice with it. Now, what I ended up doing was using the boost, because I thought, what if I could only reach this thing and I didn't want to reach down to the floor to turn up gain? I thought, well, that's perfect because I've got the boost. So here's the amount of gain without it, because it's driving the input of the 45 cal. Boost off. Boost is on. So for the section, that kind of B section of the song, basically what I did is I was using the calling, so that's a really fat pickup, but what I noticed is as I boosted, I got a little too much top end, and that's where that EQ came into play. I could just, because that's such a musical roll off on the highs, I just rolled it off. So once once again, it was just a really useful tool as like a studio tool. It's like, wow, there's something I just want to get off of the top end of this thing. And yeah, just by simply reaching over and turning that down a bit, I got it. And once again, it was so musical. I didn't feel like I was taking away a bunch of harmonics just to roll off some sizzle. So it definitely plays really nicely with pretty much any overdrive pedal. So that's pretty much it as far as how I used the pedal. There's a gazillion ways to use this thing, and it would take me too long to kind of go through every single facet. So I thought it would just be better to show you guys basically what I would do with it. It's a killer pedal. It works really, really well. Just kind of that Swiss Army knife of a pedal. So stay tuned. The next segment is right after this, and it's going to be the reamp part of the pedal, which works so well. It was so easy to use. I used the Naylor, I did the Bella, the D13, I did the Dirty Shirley, and where's that little... Oh, RedPlate's not out. It's actually right behind this rack. I also did the RedPlate. Just, you know, so you guys could hear them. So in that section, you won't see me. It'll just be a screencast, and I'll be talking to you and just showing you point to point what I did within that Pro Tools session. I'll open the actual session, I'll show you the reamp file, and then I'll let you hear what I did as I hit different amps in the different sections, in the different solo sections. So that's coming up. We'll see you in that next section. Okay, here we go, guys. I've got the original Pro Tools session open of the studio pre-drive performance I did at the top of the demo video. What I thought I would do is let you guys hear the original solo passes of each section, and then you can see them here. Here's the first solo, here's the second solo, and here's the third solo, and then below them you can see here's the reamp of one of the solos. Here's 2 reamps of the next solo. And then I did 2 reamps of the next solo after that. So that you guys could kind of hear the contrast of all the different amps and what you can do via a reamp signal. So let's just start here at the top. This was the LSL Strat into the pre-drive studio boost. In other words, it was boosted into, I was using the boost section, into the Bella Very Clean. That's how I got that kind of hair on it. So let's just listen to that first real quick, and then we'll move on to what I did with the reamp signal. So we know how that one sounded. It's really clean and sweet. So I thought, well, as a contrast, using the reamp signal, why don't I try using the divided by 13, and we'll use the clicker channel, and we'll dial that kind of gainy and see what that sounds like. So here's how that came out. So we're running this track right here. That sounded really cool. It was just a higher gain kind of version of it. You can hear all the cool just harmonics that came off of when I played the little triads and things like that within the solo take. All that became much more apparent. It sounds really cool. Just real quick, I'll let you hear the actual reamp signal, which was just the guitar straight into the DAWs. So that's what came off of the pre-drive studio into the DAWs, balanced as use for reamping. So let's look at the next solo. And oh, by the way, these are all, like you can see an aux in here with a delay on it. That's what these 3 tracks are feeding, or in this case, these 2 tracks are feeding the same delay because they're not playing at the same time. That's the delay you're hearing. And then when we go to these tracks, these 3 tracks here, which is the next solo, you'll be hearing this delay here. So nothing changes there. They're all feeding the same exact delay. So the next solo section was the callings, which was the fatter kind of rear position humbucker thing, into the pre-drive studio, into the 45 caliber, into 45 caliber stomp box, the Rockett Pedals, into the Bella dialed super clean. And what I forgot to write here is that I did turn on the boost on the pre-drive, and I also turned on the EQ and cut the highs slightly. So I'll let you hear that, and then I'll let you hear what I did with different amps. So that tone was really beautiful, but I thought, what if I went cleaner and just slightly overdriven on the Bella? So I actually turned on the boost switch of the Bella, turned the gain up a little bit, and I came out of the DAWs actually into my pedal board and hit the Wampler Ego Boost compressor just to give it some sustain, but have the amp still be pretty darn clean, just a little bit of edge on it. And I thought it came out really cool. So this is the Bella again, but it's all Bella, basically just with its own boost switch on and a compressor hitting the front end. So I thought that was really cool. You can kind of hear the differences. It's just a completely different flavor, but still sounds really, really cool. This here is the callings. That's the reamp signal, just like we had up here with the LSL. So I thought, for the next idea of reamping, I would use the Naylor, but I'd run it pretty high gain and dial it a bit brighter and see how that sounded. So take a listen to how the Naylor sounded as a higher gain amp. So I thought that came out really great as well. And one thing I don't want this to turn into is some sort of amp shootout. Like for the Naylor, the high gain thing, I actually dialed that brighter than I normally would have, so that there would be a pretty big contrast between, say, this top solo, the first solo, and this one. So you can see what I mean. Here's the Naylor. That's all amp, no stomp boxes. And of course, here's the Bella clean with 45 caliber. And then of course here is the Bella clean being hit with the compressor. All really killer sounds. I mean, all these amps are just stupid good amps. Okay, so let's move on to the next solo section then. we'll be looking at the Suhr Strat. Now, you might have wondered why I used the Suhr or a Stratocaster again. It's because I still wanted to be able to do the whammy bar Strat thing, but I really wanted to have a humbucker in the back as opposed to a single coil. That's why I jumped off the LSL and went with the Suhr. So here's the first solo one in this section, which was the Suhr Strat into the pre-drive studio, into the GTO, into the Bella amp clean. So the GTO is another Rockett pedal that I used for this sound. And this one I didn't turn the boost on, but I did use the EQ on the PDS pre-drive studio to once again kind of darken it up a little bit on the top end. So here's the original solo that you guys have heard. Whoops, let me shut that off. So we know how that sounds. So I thought as a really big contrast, I would use the Friedman Dirty Shirley, basically the gain dimed on it, and see how that would sound. So it's just all amp gain. So that's this track here, and we'll take a listen to it. The track just above that is obviously the reamp track, just like the rest of these guys. So here's the Friedman Dirty Shirley. I thought that sounded really great, and once again, I don't think I would dial quite that much gain, but I just want to give you guys contrast. And of course now I'm going to totally contradict myself, because the next idea I had for this was to use a RedPlate Tweedy combo, which is just killer sounding amp, but try to get the same tone or a similar tone to the GTO and the Bella, but have it be all amp, and also use that amp's reverb. So no delay on this track, just the amp's reverb, and see how that sounds. So I'll let you guys hear that. I thought it came out really cool. So that, to me, sounded killer. I'll just solo it up real quick so you can hear the verb on it. But I ran as much gain as I could at the front end of the amp to get the tone. And once again, it was just for another idea. You know, if I was a producer going, well, man, what if it was just all amp and just the amp reverb? How would that sound? Now I have the option to do that. So that's basically the 3 solo tracks and what I did with the different amps within the session. The one question you may have is when you look at like this Collings reamp signal, you can see that it's a larger waveform, which meant, you know, it was a hotter signal. And the reason that is hotter and is a bigger waveform is that was boosted. That was a boosted signal from the pre-drive studio. So keep that in mind. If you're going to use the boost to hit an amp harder, it's also going to send out the balance signal boosted as well. And in this case, it didn't matter because I still wanted it to be that hot to the front of the amps. And in all honesty, I haven't developed any like hard set rules about reamp signals. and how hot they should be coming in. I think the main thing is just make sure you're not somehow clipping the input to your DAWs, because that's not going to work. But other than that, I don't, and some guys will argue, but for me it's, I basically leave it alone what came in, and I don't worry about the waveform looking kind of small like on this one or up on this guy. I'm more concerned with how it sounds. So if it sounds right to me, then I'm fine, because even in this track I could manipulate that. I could go ahead and back that guy down if I wanted to. If I didn't want to send that such a boosted signal, that something that was a little bit more unity, I could just back it down anyways. But yeah, just to answer, if you guys were kind of wondering why that signal looked so much hotter than say this signal, that's basically the answer. Okay guys, so that's it. If you've got any questions about the Pettyjohn Pre-Drive Studio, please reach out to them. The website will be below. And as always, I appreciate you guys tuning into my videos. Take care. We'll see you next time.